last, my notes say, appeared that is that we were on Mr. Tovar. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. And that, let me see, I think Miss McClure had just finished questioning him. Is that how y'all remember it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. And Mr. Davis, did you call Mr. Tovar?
I originally called Mr. Tovar, yes, Judge.
Okay. And also, since we met y'all, I went over all the exhibits again. And Mr. Davis, I have some questions on one of them. Do you want me to discuss that with you now or?
Sure.
You do? Okay. And of
Well,
course,
it's whatever you prefer, Judge.
Yeah, let's go on. And of course, I've slept since I did this, after we had our hearing, just to click and reread everything again after I'd heard the testimony.
Judge, can you remind me who represents who?
Oh, yes, Miss. We'll do appearance. Mr. Davis represents Miss Abigail Moore, one of the interveners, my paternal aunt. Let me do that in just a second, Miss Greenlaw. Okay, Mr. Price, raise your hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Price is here. He's represented by Miss Bobby Shell. Miss Jamie Dyer is here. She's represented by Miss Becky Lang. Miss Billy Parker and Miss Dyer is the maternal aunt. Miss Billy Dyer, I saw her. Is she here? There you are. Okay. She is thank you. She's the maternal grandma intervener pro se. The department is here represented by Mr. Raphael Tovar and his supervisor, Ms. Jacinta Mouton, and Mr. Dwayne Rogers. The child, he is not here. Obviously, he's represented by Miss Melissa McClure as attorney ad litem and Miss Nancy McDougall as the CASA advocate, and Miss Kaylee Williman is the supervisor. I think that's everybody.
Judge.
Yes.
Nancy, I apologize. Nancy, she was logged in earlier, and I think she texted me and she said her screen was frozen. And so I don't see her logged in anymore. She's having some connection issues. She was going to restart her computer and she'll get logged back in. If it continues, I'll have her go up to the office and log in off my
Mr.
computer.
Davis, your last witness, as you said, was Mr. Tovar. So you can call your next witness. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Greenwald, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Next witness, Mr. Davis, please.
Is Mr. Tovar still here? Is he here today?
Yes, he's here.
He's here.
I mean, I kind of briefly recall. I'm not going to rehash everything, Judge, like just a few questions.
Okay, thank you.
And we're going to just kind of pick up from kind of where we were last time without going back into everything. One of the concerns it seemed like you were indicating that, or mainly the only concern I heard you really reference with regards to Miss Moore, was that at the visits, she was not listening and feeding baby Dennis too much, correct?
That's correct.
And hovering over him and not letting him explore, correct?
Correct.
That's the source of your main complaints, correct?
Correct.
But the truth is that only happened on in the early stages, correct?
No, I do think that was pretty much been a consistent thing besides the last visit.
Okay, consistent thing since the last visit. So, and then just to clarify, baby Dennis now, I mean, when he originally came in, he was overweight, right? He was pretty heavy.
That's correct.
That's not how he looks anymore, right?
No, he definitely, you can see his neck now.
Well, I mean, if you look at him now, you wouldn't actually think that he was an overweight child, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
So there's been a lot of progress there, correct?
Correct.
Now, so are you telling this court that you never sent out an email indicating how great of a job Abigail did with the visit, with the feeding, somewhere in January?
Yes, I believe I did send an email out saying that the visit did go well.
Okay. So, and that she was letting him walk around and things of that nature, and it was a great, happy visit, right?
Yes, it did go really well.
The truth is, they've all been like that since that time frame, right?
They have all been really happy, but I know that helicoptering and post supervision to the point where he's not able to explore fully is still an issue. Okay. Besides this very last visit where I heard it did improve.
But so your statement that she's been consistently not listening to directions and overfeeding, that's not accurate, right?
I would say that
Mischaracterizes testimony.
If I misunderstood you, Mr. Tovar, please correct me, but I believe you said
Judge, you're muted.
I'm muted.
No,
Yeah.
I am. So I didn't hear Mr. Rogers was talking. There were too many people talking when Mr. Rogers did something. I guess he objected.
I just objected mischaracterizes testimony.
I think that's overruled.
Mr. Tovar, I believe I heard you say that it's been a consistent problem, except for maybe this last visit or so. But that's
Yeah.
not accurate, is it?
I believe it is accurate in the email. I was pretty much just referring to that the visit did go well. I don't have it here in front of me, but if I remember it correctly, it was that the visit did go well. He was able to explore and walk around. However, the more we've observed Miss Abigail Moore is we notice that she does closely supervise him to the point where it does kind of impede him a little bit. And I believe January, I'm not too sure what the timeline was for visits, but I think that was around somewhere in the middle, maybe. But I would say that the statement still is accurate, that her supervision, not following directions, that's always been an issue.
So you never sent an email saying to the extent Miss Moore brought Mr. Moore today as well as Canyon, which was nice to see, and they did well in feeding him the food the caregiver brought. Then you talked about the group playing things and how he was changed, supervised appropriately, and overall there were no issues.
Right.
Anything like that?
That does sound familiar, and I believe the feeding in that visit did go well. So maybe it's, I guess I could say it's not a consistent thing, but it's definitely somewhere in the 90th percentile for still being an issue.
But with regards to baby Dennis's health, I mean, assuming you're not being picky, but regarding baby Dennis's health, he's not a big overweight child anymore, is he?
That's correct.
Okay. Now I want to, so you heard all the testimony last time. You'd seen some of the text messages come up drawing, inferences about drugs that were being supplied by grandparents, conflict with some problems with the aunts that we pointed out in their home studies. You remember all that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Or, yeah, I do remember that.
So is it my understanding at the time we had that hearing last time, it was the only people that the department could recommend were the great aunt in San Antonio, correct?
Correct.
And Abigail Moore, right?
That's correct.
All right. So following all your testimony we had last time, is the department still telling this court that placement with great aunt is the proper placement?
Yes, that's correct.
Just refresh the court. That's the disabled aunt. They've been through all sorts of trauma. None of the references would call them back, right?
Objection. Mischaracterizes and argumentative.
Hold on.
Correct, Judge. I can pick up from there.
Okay.
Mr. Tovar?
Yes, sir.
So again, yeah, we were talking, the only two placements that are home studies that have been approved were replacements that were approved were Abigail Moore and the aunts in San Antonio, right?
That's correct.
And I went through a variety of questions with you last time and to talk about some concerns because the department didn't seem to have any. But again, you're indicating that if it's up to the department compared to Abigail Moore, y'all think that placement with the aunt that had a host of health problems, she got an amputated foot, she's on disability, legs broken in a number of places, a variety of medications that she has to take, heart surgeries, strokes, and all sorts of things that have happened to her, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then they gave y'all some references. They've had all sorts of trauma in their life too, correct?
Correct.
I mean, she's lost two of her kids, didn't raise one of them, right?
Correct.
And I believe they gave you these references and really nobody called you back, right?
That's correct.
Actually, one did call you back. It was her own daughter, Crystal, right?
She did. She called me back briefly. The person who conducted the home study assessment, that wasn't me. We do contract out to a private provider. So I did reach out to Crystal and she called me back once. And then after that, she told me she'd call me back later and she wouldn't respond to me when I tried to call her again.
But Crystal's the one that said, don't place with my mom, right?
That's correct.
That's the department's choice for placement now, right?
That's correct.
And wasn't the aunt's wife, didn't she test positive for marijuana or something too while this was going on?
Correct.
And she's had other problems too, right? They all come from abusive backgrounds, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, but assuming the court doesn't place with great aunt in San Antonio that actually had never seen this child before this case started. I believe that came out last time too. The department's position then would be placed with Abigail Moore, right?
That's correct.
Pass witness.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Anybody have any questions of Mr. Tovar?
I do.
Let's
So,
see. Go on, Ms. Lane.
okay, Mr. Tovar, the first question that came up was that was your only, from Mr. Davis, was your main complaint about the visits between Miss Moore and the baby because of her not listening and feeding too much? And you said yes, but do you also have a concern about how well she's bonding with the child?
Yes, I do. In terms of how visitations go, I feel like Dennis is in general a very happy child, and he seems like he could get along with really anybody. But I'm noticing that his attachment or his attitude in visits changes definitely compared to Miss Moore versus when Miss Dyer, Mr. and Miss Parker, and then the Anderson, Miss Kathy Anderson, Linda DeBravo. He definitely seems to be very attached to them, and seems like in my experience, he's very attached to Mr. Dyer as well.
Mr. Tovar, what did you say? Linda Anderson, something Bravo?
Oh, sorry, it's Kathy Anderson and Linda DeBravo.
Thank you.
Okay. And then another question that came up again was, I think the terminology was that baby Dennis was a big overweight child at the beginning of the case. And but at the beginning of the case, hadn't he been in the care of Miss Nancy primarily, his paternal grandmother? Is that right?
That's correct. It was told to me that he was with Miss Price, Nancy Price, for around 75 to 90% of the time.
And you also heard testimony from Abigail, and she even had pictures, right, that showed she had a lot of contact with the child during that time. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then we talked about the email that was sent. Did you hear the date of when that was? Was that early when the visitations began? Is it possible that it was after, it was before the occupational therapist had provided very specific instructions that you guys were hoping the caregiver, the visitors would follow? Is that a possibility?
That sounds about right. And initially he started with physical therapy through an intake, and then he started physical therapy before he actually transitioned to occupational therapy. So at the time, we didn't have very many recommendations from ECI, I believe, during that time in January.
So the point of your concerns have been, once those guidelines came from the licensed professional guiding the proper way to feed baby Dennis, those instructions were not followed. Is that your intention?
That's correct.
Okay. And then finally, we talked about the approved home studies, and you've already provided this testimony before, because it's been brought up again today, I'd like to reiterate it. The only reason that the Dyers cannot be recommended by the state is because of the failure of their home study, and that is solely because of the criminal history that Mr. Dyer has. Is that correct?
That's correct. The only concern listed in their home study that led to the denial was Mr. Dyer's criminal history.
And that's actually a policy rule within the department, right?
That's correct.
So any conviction of a particular, and that actual offense fell within the penal code, which is an absolute bar for you, the department, to be able to approve the home study. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So absent that, they'd be your number one choice. Is that right?
As it stands right now, I can't make a recommendation, or I can make a recommendation that we can't approve them just solely based off of that.
Based on solely because of the whole home study. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. I pass the witness.
Mr. Tovar, we've discussed how baby Dennis was overweight at the beginning of the case, and he's made progress on his weight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And where has he been? You don't need to give the address or the name, but what sort of care has he been residing in since the case began?
He's been in foster care in a very urban area.
And so a lot of that weight loss is really attributed to the fosters and their caregiving. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They've been working extremely diligent with him since day one through various appointments, and definitely been really closely working with him.
Okay. And your testimony regarding Ms. Moore's visits, there may have been one visit that went well in January, but in general, you still have concerns about helicoptering and overfeeding and bonding?
That's correct.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Tovar.
Anybody else?
Just
Ms.
briefly,
Parker.
Judge.
Okay, hold, Ms. Parker, we'll get to you. Michelle.
Thank you. Mr. Tovar, and this is really just a procedural question. If the Dyers were to be placement, due to their not having a qualified home study, would that affect any sort of benefits monthly that they could receive on behalf of baby Dennis?
Yes, they wouldn't be able to receive kinship funding through our kinship program if they were approved as placement.
And long-term, if they were considered as permanent placement, once this case is over, baby Dennis also would not receive any permanent kinship placement benefits either. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And the department can't approve placement for baby Dennis temporarily. And in the long term, without a qualifying home study, the department also could not approve an adoption of baby Dennis by the Dyers. Is that also true?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Tovar, since our last home study, we had a revisit by you and an associate last Monday. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you see any noticeable difference in our home?
Yes, I did notice that the house was decluttered. A lot of the pictures saying that, like for the kitchen counter, for example, all of that was cleared out. Walkways were made and the whole house seemed to be reorganized in order to be safe for a child of Dennis's age to be walking around in. I did notice maybe a few concerns with like fragile objects maybe being on shelves, but nothing to the point where it was, I would say that it would be considered dangerous. I noticed that, fire extinguisher was purchased and smoke detectors were also purchased. And it was obvious that some significant attempts were made in order to try to baby-proof the home and make sure that it's safe and up to fire safety codes.
Okay. Also, did we have a discussion concerning an email about drug use and drug selling?
Yes, that's correct. We had a discussion about the, I believe it was Mr. Davis who had mentioned the text message. I believe it was from Jamie to Carrie, saying that our mom had purchased drugs for Laura. I believe that's the message that we had a discussion about.
Oh, well, did we explain that to you, to your
Yes, you did.
satisfaction? Is there anything else that is keeping us from being considered adopting parents?
The only thing that's waiting in order for your home study to be approved is we do have the emergency background caregivers that I reached out to you for. Backup caregivers. I haven't been able to get in touch with them, and I just needed their information.
You haven't made the contact.
I'm
Robert?
sorry, Ms. Parker. Can y'all not talk on top of each other?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I missed that. Backup caregivers I haven't been able to get in touch with.
Yes, ma'am. I have been able to get in touch with the backup caregivers to do background checks. So I did send you a message asking if you could maybe reach out to them and either get their information or allow me to, or just tell them to call me back.
Okay. I didn't receive that message. Maybe my husband did, but we'll make sure we do that. His nephew, I know, will give John a very good recommendation, and myself as well. So we'll contact them today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Parker?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McClure?
Thank you, Judge. Raphael, the department has certain policies it has to follow, and those policies don't allow you to make a recommendation for the Dyers because of the formal criminal history, correct?
That's correct.
And people can look really good on paper. People can get their house cleaned. They know when the home study people are coming. They can clean up their house. They can make sure that they've got all the rules followed. So, if you really wanted to, just about anybody could look good on paper.
That's correct, yes.
But as far as hours of observation, of actual visits with actual possible placements, you and I and everyone else in our group here, we've spent over 30 hours, almost 40 hours now. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And, comparing, if you had the choice of only looking at a piece of paper and determining placement based on the piece of paper, or over almost 40 hours of actual observation of the child with the various placements, if you could pick one or the other and only one or the other, which one do you think would give you better information?
I feel like the watching visitations occur and seeing the actual interactions in real time. And not only that, but watching the growth in each caregiver week by week and learning how to bond with the child, I would say proves to be much more valuable when it comes to determining the appropriateness of a caregiver in real time.
Do you remember at the beginning of the case when we had Zoom meetings with Nancy and then with Abigail?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think it was at that Zoom meeting is where Nancy said that she had cared for Dennis 75 to 90% of the time.
That's correct.
Did she ever exhibit any concern about his weight?
No, it was actually quite the opposite when she found out that we weren't feeding him at every single time that he was crying, especially at the very, very first visit with Miss Carrie Price and Miss Nancy Price at the very start of the case. She had really expressed some significant concerns that we weren't feeding him enough, that he was crying, so we needed to continue to feed him. But our concerns were that he is significantly overweight and he was currently placed on a diet or regimen to where essentially his calorie intake wouldn't increase. They would just allow his development to catch up with his current weight. But Miss Nancy Price didn't find that answer sufficient. And so it was definitely a little bit of a combative discussion trying to get her to see our reasoning.
And that same conversation was had with Abigail Moore. Did she exhibit any concern about his weight during her conversation?
No, she did not.
And so with the child near the time of removal, the two people in the Price family that were trying to obtain placement exhibited no concerns at all about that.
Yes, that's correct.
How long has Mr. Jamie Moore, Jamie, too many people, and I'm sorry, I'm still sick, Judge. James Dyer, how long has he not just talked the talk, but how long has he walked the walk of being an exemplary citizen since his release from prison?
Oh gosh, I think it's off the top of my head, I think it's been, I want to say almost 10, 20 years, somewhere in that range, if I had to wager a guess.
And during that time, life hasn't been easy necessarily for him.
That's correct. I've talked to various amount of references for him, and seems like each of them kind of had a different insight into him at different points in his life. One, I think, was his first employer when he was released, who wound up becoming really close friends of him and his family. And then there was also a longtime employer who I believe he either is currently working for or used to work for as well, who had great things to say about him. And everybody just seemed to say that initially, when they had first met him, they heard of his criminal charge of the negligent homicide. And I believe the wife of one of his references said that she was definitely, it raised her eyebrows and her ears a little bit when she heard about it. But then she said over time, when they had gotten to know Mr. Dyer and allow their kids to go over and currently allow him to babysit, that they became very close friends, and they think that he's a very well-mannered, well-meaning individual.
So he's had years to demonstrate a change in his behavior.
That's correct.
Do you believe that based on your observations of the way Dennis responds during his visits with Jamie and James, do you believe that he is bonded to them?
Absolutely. He, at this last visit, watching him essentially check in with each of the caregivers when he was playing, he would go and play at the kitchenette set in the visitation room. And then he would just turn around and voluntarily walk over to Mr. Dyer and ask to be picked up and held. And then he would hold them and play with him and then set him back down and allow him to go explore. And that happened quite a few times during the visit, where he would just walk up to Mr. Dyer or Miss Dyer and just desire to be held by them. And just almost, I put it as checking in, because it just seemed like he would just say, oh, I have to go over there and give my aunt or uncle a kiss, and then I'll go back over here to the kitchen set.
And did that seem to be exhibiting to you the signs of a child who is safe and feels secure and bonded with those caregivers?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely think that was a major indication of his attachment to the caregivers, or to Mr. Dyer and Miss Dyer.
And do you believe that the time that Dennis has had to get to know them and to bond with them, that would be a good bridge towards placement with them at some point if the court were to rule for that? Yes,
I believe that would be really, really great for us to use if the court was to order placement.
You can't recommend it because of the department's policies.
That's correct. I can't recommend it, and the department doesn't recommend it, but that is something that we could build off of if placement was ordered by the court.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Judge.
Anybody else?
I do. I have more. Go ahead.
Hold on, Mr. Davis, to you.
Yeah, Judge, if you don't mind, just briefly, I didn't want to have to open it all back up again, but just to kind of refresh, because we did stop after you were talking a long time last hearing. Okay. we went through a variety of inconsistencies in Jamie's report, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're telling this court today that the only concerns I have are this old criminal history from dad years ago, right?
That's correct.
You're not concerned about any misstatements and misleading of information you might be getting, right?
That's correct. As far as I understand it from everything in the home study, I do believe it to be accurate until I have something on paper saying otherwise.
No, hold on, Raphael. You're saying now it's accurate, but look, last time, and I hate to have to go back into it all, unless if court would like to stop me if it recalls the previous testimony, that's fine. But when this first starts, we've got Jamie Dyer saying that she's got a great relationship with her mom and stepdad, right?
That's correct.
And that's not true, right?
I do believe that she does, based off the visitations. In fact, they do sit in occasionally with each other and they get along really well.
I'm sorry. While this case has been pending, you're saying they've got a great relationship, right?
Yes, I haven't observed any sort of contempt or.
Now let's be clear, but you're aware, because we talked about this last time in your testimony, that her and her mother had a huge source of conflict, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I mean, for going back to her childhood, she left home at age 17, right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Is this all in the report? Got married, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then we talked about how in Jamie's report, she says there was no history of drug abuse or any physical abuse in my family growing up, right?
That's correct.
And I asked you last time, I said, well, isn't it true though that she indicated also, or that there's stuff out there indicating that stepfather used to abuse her?
That's correct.
Okay, but that's okay. And then I showed you a text last time from Carrie saying that Jamie's mom had involvement in getting Lori into her drug problem.
That's correct.
That Lori went to prison for, right?
That's correct.
None of them could adopt Wesley except for Carrie, right?
Yes, I believe that's what we talked about.
Right. And then you also believe us talking about how Jamie had called the cops on her mom numerous times and had no trespassing signs on her in the front yard?
Yes, I believe that was our discussion.
Didn't invite her to Carrie's baby shower?
That's correct.
Okay. And then and that's one of her main sources of assistance, right? If I need help, if I need a date night, I'm going to go give them to, mom and grandpa and stepdad, right?
That's correct.
Before this suit, she had a terrible relationship with her mother.
That's
right.
As far as I've heard it, yes.
Okay, so as far as you've heard, yes. So anytime anything comes up on Abigail, oh, she's not bonding, oh, she feeds too much. But anything that comes up on the Dyer side, oh, that's all ass, water under the bridge, right?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
And then when this case started, the only person that jumped through all the hoops immediately before Carrie's death was Abigail, wasn't it?
Yeah, she was the first person that we looked at besides Miss Nancy Price for placement.
Exactly. And the Dyers were nowhere to be found. They weren't coming forward, right?
I believe that was just because due to Miss Carrie Price's not wanting them at the time due to her being under duress by Mr. Price.
The duress y'all are now alleging, right? But she's got a huge history of lying and making things up too, correct?
I did hear that she does have a history of being deceptive, but I definitely significantly believe that she wasn't under duress when she came to the office with bruises on her arm.
So, and just to make sure everybody remembers, the violence that was going on in this relationship, it was volatile on both sides, right?
That's correct.
In fact, the original case starts with Carrie being the aggressor. In fact, a protective order was granted against her, correct?
That's correct.
She's had multiple endangerment of children charges in her past, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, she endangered her other child, Wesley, tried to drive him off into another car, asked him if he wants to die, right?
That's just what I've heard. I don't know the specific details of it.
You've never seen the report where it's in the police report where she says that to him?
No, I haven't seen the police report of that charge.
Okay, but you're aware of the incident, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and you're also aware she drove the car with Wesley in it through Cody Young's house, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and Cody Young is not even related to Wesley, but he ended up being the adoptive father, right?
That's correct.
Okay. The Dyers have almost zero relationship with Wesley, right? They never took him in.
I'm not very familiar with the true extent of their relationship with Wesley.
And then the Dyers also are saying, we want to make sure we isolate baby Dennis from the Price side, right?
I believe they did talk about that they are open to doing visitations, at least as long as CPS is willing to help facilitate transport or handoffs or supervision, kind of like how we're doing now.
But in their report, they said, we want to get restraining orders. We don't want him to be in with the Price family, right?
That's correct.
Yet his blood half brother is Canyon, and that's with grandma, right? Dennis's mother, right?
That's correct.
And then you got no concerns about any potential inconsistencies in their reports about maybe their finances. The Dyers.
As far as I understand it, each of the Dyers are able to definitely sustain themselves, and as well as baby Dennis, should he be placed there.
But each of them are. Now, we talked about last time, so I believe I showed you a message about, or to ask you, would it surprise you to know that, well, first of all, they don't own the home they're in, right?
Yes, I believe it's owned by their employer.
His employer, right?
His employer, yes.
Yeah. And so he's making about $4,100 a month, right?
Correct.
And Ms. Dyer, who just got a job fairly recently, within a year or two, right? She makes $2,700, right?
That's correct.
At the time this case started, at the time y'all did the home study, they didn't even have health insurance, did they?
No, they did not.
Right. And then did they put that fence up around the lake area that was a concern?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And they both work, right? So compared to Abigail Moore, who was a stay-at-home mom, you're still saying that that's the proper placement, right?
Absolutely. Both caregivers working is definitely not a concern to us.
Understood. But they're not going to get assistance from the department, right?
Not kinship funding assistance, no.
Right. And so childcare, none of this is factored into their budget. They don't even have gas on their budget in the home study. Remember that?
Well, I believe the department will still pay for daycare for the Dyers.
Okay. And their rent's only $600, but what happens if they can't live there anymore?
Well, I feel like in any case, when they're not able to live there anymore, then they would have to find new housing.
Right. And we talked last time that she says that she has a good relationship with her sister, but that wasn't true. It's Carrie. That wasn't true either, was it?
I believe the source of strain from the relationship with her sister was due to Mr. Price and the violence that was going on in the household.
Okay, had nothing to do. We'll get back into it. Had nothing to do with the fact that Jamie evicted her from a contract for deed she was trying to execute on a house that Jamie owned, right? Nothing to do with that.
According to Miss Carrie Price, a lot of her strain with the relationship with her sister was due to the fact that she was continuing to stay with Mr. Price despite the violence that was happening. This was
prior to Mr. Price. This was with her and Wesley, right? And she evicted them both, right?
Miss Carrie Price never mentioned that that was the source of strain in her relationship, so I'm unable to speak on any events that occurred before the case opened.
Okay, but so when she took her money, didn't give it back to her, kicked her out, so Hope could come there. Wesley had nowhere to go. You're not even going to try to mention that as potential conflict. It all had to do with Dennis.
Objection, argumentative.
Overruled.
Could you repeat that question one more time for me? I think you cut out just briefly there for a second.
Sure. You said, I essentially asked you that you're telling this court that the source of her conflict with Jamie was only isolated to Dennis, had nothing to do with other instances in the past, such as evicting her, keeping her money, and kicking her and Wesley out of the home, right?
As far as I heard it from Miss Carrie Price, yes, the source of strain of relationship was due to her relationship with Mr. Price.
And then I believe there was concerns about, Hope lives in her other home, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And Hope's got her own kids, right?
That's correct.
Hope's not financially stable, is she really?
I can't really speak on Hope's finances.
Well, her husband's now in jail. She had it, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. For drugs, right?
Not very familiar with the charges against her husband.
Okay. So, and then she works at like the dollar store or something like that, correct?
I believe so, yes.
None of her kids have any college education.
Believe so, yes.
I mean, in the report, they wish they'd push college, right? And then
correct.
she's got three grandkids with Hope, right?
That's correct.
And Hope's having to live in that house that she kicked Carrie out of, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then she's got two other children and then they've got kids too, right?
Correct.
None of them are, financially well off, right?
Correct. As far as I understand it.
So she has a lot of extended family and grandkids that are going to need her help potentially, right?
Potentially, but I think it's difficult to say. I think Mr. Dyer and Miss Dyer are able to definitely care for the baby if that's their sole focus.
That's their sole focus, right?
Right. As far as I understand it, yes. But it does also seem like the family has significant support within itself.
And just to get back into it, Abigail Moore, she's got like what, 20,000 in disposable income per month. They live on a 300-acre residence. Family support. She's well removed from the conflict in Kingsland, right?
I believe she is removed from the conflict in Kingsland, but I do know that she did visit with Miss Nancy Price pretty frequently whenever she was the primary caregiver for the child.
Okay, so again, Miss Price, Nancy Price, lives in either Kingsland area or Seabrook, all of which are hours away from Huntsville, correct?
Correct.
And Miss Abigail Moore is 38, stay-at-home mom. And she's got 3 children of her own, right?
Correct.
Okay. She's involved in PTA sporting events, right?
Correct.
You didn't ask about all her other references because at the time you just needed the few that were required for the home study, and that was sufficient, right?
Correct.
How many multiple visits have you made out to Abigail Moore's residence?
I have not been out to her residence.
How many updated visits for home study reports have been done at Abigail's house?
There have been none.
How many other references did you ask her for?
I have not asked for any.
Right. So when Jamie Dyer's coming in here with, I got 30, 40 references, you didn't ask for any of that stuff from Abigail, did you?
No, because it wasn't appropriate at the time.
Is it appropriate now?
No, because her home study is still approved and the department feels like it would be a safe and appropriate environment.
Right. But compared to the Dyer still, the only one hiccup we have is the killing of Mr. Dyer's wife, right?
Yes, that's correct.
The killing in which alcohol was involved, right?
That's correct.
The killing in which the only witness was his own mother, right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And it was a murder trial. The prosecutor didn't just offer him a plea deal or give him something for this tragic accident. It went all the way to trial, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
And of course, we have a witness that was his mother. And that's really all we had, right?
I believe so, yes. I'm not too familiar on who was called at the trial for witnessing.
Judge, I'm going to object to further questions on this line as calling for speculation. I don't think the witness has personal knowledge of the details of the trial. I've tried to allow some leeway, but
if Mr. Tovar knows the answer to the question, he can answer it.
And Mr. Tovar, then he had, now everybody keeps throwing around this term. It's a misdemeanor charge. It's a misdemeanor charge, and now it's a felony because the law changed, right? We keep talking about that qualifying element, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. But then he went to prison he was sentenced, I guess, for, I believe Miss Lang, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, indicated that he got like 9 years for the homicide. But then what really escalated his penalty was the fact that at the time he had a burglary charge, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Where him and his cousin were just going out and got some alcohol from a convenience store, right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And they charged me with burglary, right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
But because of this tragic killing of his wife, the judge gave him 20 years when he revoked probation, right?
Yes, I believe that was the sentencing.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to a misstatement of facts. We had testimony earlier at the previous hearing when Mr. Tovar was able to testify to the judgment related to the Class A misdemeanor criminally negligent homicide. That sentence was 1 year confinement in the county jail with a $3,000 fine. It was not a 9-year sentence.
I thought
okay.
I remember that. I mean, I remember when it happened. He got a year in jail, but because of the conviction, he got revoked on the burglary charge and actually served 9 years. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
9 years of a 20-year sentence.
That's my understanding, Your Honor.
And thanks for correcting me. So, I mean, I guess back to my point. So for this tragic accident, they revoked him and gave him 20, right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And again, this tragic accident, it didn't just result in a plea. Oh, it was an accident, so sorry, but you got to serve something. he actually was tried for murder, right?
Not too familiar with what he was tried for at the time. I do know that it just shows up as criminally negligent homicide.
And then Mr. Dyer has a child too, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that family, the mother's side of the family, wouldn't let him have any access or involvement to that child, right?
I believe that was the case. If I'm thinking it's who I think it is, then I think that over time they have been rebuilding their relationship.
Rebuilding their relationship. They've met once and they've reached out on Messenger, and she won't even give him her phone number, will she?
Not very familiar about what's going on with their relationship currently.
Currently, but it's in the report that you could at least testify to that, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And she was cut off from all access because of an accident, right? I mean, I know it's a big deal, but you're telling me that the family just could not see any way, shape, or form that man, this was tragic on all fronts, even for Mr. Dyer, who's going to prison. Like, he lost his wife. This is so tragic. For whatever reason, they thought that he shouldn't have any involvement with that child, right?
I'm not too familiar on what discussions were going in their family internally, but I do know that it led to difficulty in Mr. Dyer having contact or access to his other child.
How many guns are in their household now, the Dyer household?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Don't recall. And then again, it was an alcohol-related incident that resulted in the death of his wife. He took AA classes. Still drinks, though, doesn't he?
As far as I understand it, maybe occasionally when they go out for dinner, maybe on the weekends.
Okay. And again, on Abigail Moore's side, there was no source of any prior CPS history.
Correct.
No concerns about her husband or her children, right?
Correct.
No criminal history or anything like that, right?
Correct.
According to you, Ms. Moore is not bonding well with the child, right?
Correct.
You don't think you're being a little biased?
I do not think I'm being biased now.
Oh, pass this witness, Judge.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I do, Your Honor.
Ms. Lang.
So, Mr. Tovar, did the Dyers, when they talked to you about their finances and looking at their capacity to take care of baby Dennis, did they have any concerns about their finances?
No, they did not. And they didn't seem concerned about the fact that they would not be able to receive kinship funding. And they seemed ready to take on their responsibility.
And in your experience in training, how much family makes and has in the bank, if they're able to meet their needs, does that really matter in the ability to take care of a child if they're financially stable? They don't have $20,000 sitting in the bank a month versus, let's see, that would be $68,000 a month. Does that mean the one with $68,000 shouldn't be the one to take care of the child because they don't have as much money? Does that really matter?
68.
No.
I'm sorry.
6,800, not 68.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Judge. 6,800. I wish.
No, finances do not directly have an impact on placement unless it affects their ability to care for the child.
Okay. And once again, I think actually Mr. Davis caught himself on this one. He had you, whenever the testimony was, they live on the ranch, but they don't own that house. And you testified correct. He goes, well, they don't own another home. And you go, correct. But then he, in his own statement to a question, said, well, Jamie kicked Carrie out of the house she owned. So your understanding is they do own another home, correct?
Yes, that is my understanding.
All righty. And then Abigail didn't list anybody on her references for the home study that were in the Price family, did she?
No, she did not.
And has anybody from the department reached out? I mean, she didn't list them on a reference, but have y'all called her sister Rebecca?
No, we have not.
Have you called her sister Terry?
No, we have not.
Have you called her brother, Michael, I think is his name. He lives in Mississippi. His wife is Sandy.
Marshall.
Marshall, thank you.
We have had quite a few email chains together having contact with him.
But they're not here today to testify, are they?
No, they are not.
And nobody showed up last week from the Price family to testify on behalf of Abigail as being the selected person in their family to be the placement. Is that right?
That's correct.
And she didn't list them on her home study reference.
That's correct.
Do you have a little concern as the department looks at their recommendations for placement after hearing the testimony at our first hearing that Abigail wasn't aware? I think her testimony was she just wasn't aware of Dennis's violent tendencies. Did that concern you?
Yes, my particular concern was she stated she wasn't aware of any of the abuse or violence that was going on in the household, but simultaneously was claiming to be a major part of baby Dennis's life.
Okay. And are you, as part of your training, are you familiar with what's called the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services Placement Process Resource Guide? Is that something you guys have to read to help kind of pay attention to, something that's distributed to conservatorship workers?
Yes, that is something we have to go through.
And in it, it talks about things you need to consider whenever you're making your placement recommendations. You're familiar with that?
Yes, that's correct.
And basically it outlines what's called those best interests of the children things, right? Where a party is able to meet the educational needs and the physical needs and the emotional needs of the child. Is that your understanding of what that guideline talks about?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And it talks about the ability, the caregiver, whenever siblings are separated, it mentions that an important part of helping y'all make your placement decision is that caregiver's commitment to maintaining sibling contact. That you remember reading, that's a very important thing in the manual.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the manual also says that the department should evaluate every option. And you feel like y'all have done that in this case so far?
Absolutely, yes.
And it says that the staff should make the placement decision in the best interest of the child with input from the child, right?
Correct.
The child's family, that would be a woman who's passed away now, Carrie.
Correct.
And then, of course, his dad, who's sitting in jail, and the attorney for the child and the guardian ad litem, correct?
Correct.
So that's the guideline out of the department's manual, the things that go into helping you guys make your placements.
Correct.
And that's what you base, if you didn't have to have this eliminator because of the standard policy for the criminal history, those are the things you're looking at. So if that's taken away, then you've already testified before that the Dyers are able to meet and check those boxes. And you feel like in earnest, you've done that and you've assessed Miss Anderson's home, Miss Moore's home, Miss Parker's home. We don't have a final ruling on Miss Parker, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then Miss Dyer. All right. I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Anybody else?
Just one, if nobody else has one.
Okay, hold on. Let's see. Miss Parker, question.
Mr. Tovar, from our home studies, are you aware of our financial situation?
Yes, I am.
That my husband makes in excess of $120,000 a year. Our home is completely paid for, and we have no bills other than our utility bills.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. From observing us at the home visits, do you feel that Jamie's relationship with us is strained in any way?
Absolutely not. I mean, I personally watched you guys sit in the visitation room for 20 to 30 minutes, and it seems like you guys get along really well.
And would you think that we would let them go short of money, anything, insurance, to help raise this baby, our grandbaby, hopefully to be there in their home?
Correct. I believe that the family support on your side of the family has been really great, and it seems like that everyone is willing to help out, and whoever, if the court were to rule a placement with anybody on the maternal family, that everyone would be willing to pitch in.
Thank you. One other question about the Price family support. Of course, the father is in jail for murder of our daughter. You're aware of that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and are you aware also that Nancy Price is under indictment also concerning this case, who is the major finance person for Abigail other than her husband?
Yes, it's my understanding that she is under criminal investigation.
Okay. Are you aware also that, I'm sorry, I can't speak well, I'm kind of upset, but are you aware that Nancy and her husband have signed over their property in Kingsland to Abigail Moore?
Objection, relevance.
I'll overrule that objection. He can answer if he knows. He probably doesn't even know.
That's just what I've heard, is that they have signed it over, but of course, I haven't seen any documents or anything stating that.
Well, if that were true, do you think that might have an influence over the Moore family, Morris, I'm sorry, I don't remember their last name, since there's been very little input from Abigail's husband. I've only seen his picture one time during all these proceedings. Anyway, the point I was trying to make is her major finances is coming from her mother, who hid the baby from the CPS.
And you got to ask Mr. Tovar questions. You can't make statements right now.
Sorry. Are you aware that Nancy left knowing that the baby was supposed to be picked up by the CPS and went to Seabrook?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah. I guess that's all.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Parker, I'm sorry, Judge. Ms. Parker, what's the name of your husband?
John Parker, he's right
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, Mr. Tovar? No.
No, Your Honor.
No, ma'am.
If I could ask that, if nobody else wants to ask one, I would like to ask just a few follow-ups.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed. I'll be quick. Just real quick, what we just heard Ms. Parker saying, the finances that were verified come from Miss Abigail Moore's husband's business, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then I believe everybody's making some comments about how they don't believe how Abigail didn't know about the abuse, right?
Correct.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that Carrie even indicated that Abigail and Rebecca were kept isolated from the information?
No wouldn't surprise me to know. I believe I heard that from her at one point.
Okay, you heard that from her at one point. And so, but yet y'all are all continue to doubt it. Are you saying Carrie was lying when she told you that, or do you actually believe it?
I think it's difficult to say if I think she was lying, but it's also difficult because she was under some significant duress to push for placement with Abigail Moore from Mr. Price.
Sure. Can I share my screen, Judge?
Yes, sir.
And this is a text message from Carrie. See the highlighted portion?
Yes.
It's her talking with Dennis. Your mother told me she's sheltered Abigail and Rebecca from our crazy, that they know nothing about the chaos that has happened, and she wants to keep it that, I'm assuming, way. That's what she meant.
Yes, that seems to be what
would that seem to give some credibility to her statement at that point that Abigail and Rebecca didn't know?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm not quite sure what we were just shown, but it does not appear to have been an exhibit that was offered prior to the hearings. What exhibit was that marked, Mr. Davis?
I will be happy to mark it as exhibit number 11 and offer it in. It was simply to get clarification on whether he knew about it.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. It does not comply with the court's rules in terms of provision of exhibits prior to Zoom hearings. In addition, I'd ask any of the testimony be stricken from the record regarding specific quotes taken from that text. Now, if Mr. Tovar,
I think Mr. Davis was just using it to try to refresh Mr. Tovar's recollection. Isn't that correct, Mr. Davis?
That is correct, Judge. And for rebuttal only, it wasn't anticipated until this has all been coming up. But correct, Your Honor.
Objections overruled.
Mr. Tovar, no further questions.
Your Honor, that was, I'd like to re-urge my objection to refresh Mr. Tovar's recollection. He did not write that email. And he did not receive that email. It's not his to recall. He had never seen that document before.
Well, okay, maybe not that, but I mean, it was Mr. Davis. Yeah, can introduce it as a rebuttal exhibit if you'd like, because it wasn't in his exhibit list and he didn't know it was going to be necessary, I assume.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, Your Honor, just on that level, I would like to offer it as, rebuttal Intervenor Moore's exhibit. I think I would be at 11, and I
Yes,
can
sir.
label it and email it as a rebuttal exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, it'll be admitted. And this just goes kind of in chronological order as people have asked you questions today. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You talk about the visits between the Moores and the Dyers and the Parkers. When y'all do the visits, is it always these people are first, these people are second, or does it change up based upon baby Dennis being tired, or how does that go?
We've been on a rotating schedule with our visitations. So essentially whoever's first, there were 4 parties having visitations initially. And so it would go from the first person would then become the second person, the fourth person becomes the first person, and they would all just shift up the ladder, and we would just continue to rotate them through.
Okay. So one person is stuck with baby Dennis being tired all the time.
That's correct. Everyone was able to see him at least once twice or maybe even 3 times whenever it was the very beginning of the day and as well as the very end of the day.
Okay, and how are we doing the visits like now?
Right now, visits are set to where we have, I believe we have Miss Abigail Moore and Kathy Anderson and Linda DeBravo are seeing him 1 week for 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then the other would see them from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then the following week, it would be the other parties who are not involved in visitations. So it would be Mr. and Miss Parker and Mr. and Miss Dyer from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
He goes from 9 to 1 with no nap.
Yes, that's been really difficult for him to be wanting to nap. At daycare, when they usually have 2 naps a day, sometimes they'll be lucky to get him down for 1. We're working with ECI in order to get him to sleep more, but he only sleeps when he feels secure or swaddled, or it has to be pretty much completely quiet for him. And even then, he does give a lot of resistance.
Is he at the second visit? Let's see, from 11 to 1. Is he a bear or is he good?
At this last visit that I observed, he seemed to be doing really well until maybe the last 15, 20 minutes. I could see it in his face. He's definitely getting very tired. And then when I was transporting him back to daycare for the day, he was completely knocked out in the backseat.
Okay. So he goes back to daycare after he's been in 4 hours of visits one day a week?
Yes, that's correct. He goes, and I'm not too sure when their nap time is for the second part of the day, but he does go back to the daycare.
Do the fosters work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now we hear a lot about the home study on the Dyers, and I get the impression that, and I haven't picked up a penal code in 10 years, to be honest with y'all, because I don't have to do that stuff anymore. But it sounds like criminally negligent homicide is now a felony, whereas when Mr. Dyer was convicted of it, it was a misdemeanor. Is it now a felony, or do you know, Mr. Tovar?
I actually did, Your Honor. That's correct.
It's true. Okay. Okay. Does it make a difference with CPS that at the time of Mr. Dyer's conviction, it was a misdemeanor and not a felony?
No, it doesn't change the denial of the home study still.
Is it because of just the offense title in general, or is it because, I mean, are they just not saying, oh, 20 years ago it was a misdemeanor? I mean, do you know?
Yes, it's the actual charge itself for the actual title is the reason for the denial, not whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor.
Okay. Because, back probably the same time Mr. Dyer was convicted, a lot of things went from felony to misdemeanor, and maybe things went from misdemeanor to felony. I guess they don't pay attention to that. Does it have anything to do, does the denial on the home study have anything to do with the revocation, or just the offense, criminally negligent homicide?
That just the offense is the reason for the denial, the actual title for the offense itself.
Okay. Now, when Ms. Shell was asking you questions, you said that the Dyers wouldn't be entitled to any kinship funds, et cetera. Y'all couldn't approve the adoption. And you said that baby Dennis wouldn't be entitled to any type of benefits.
He would still receive benefits, like he still would receive like a CCS, paying for daycare would still be one he would receive. Obviously he'd still be on Medicaid through us. But I believe in terms of like adoption benefits, I don't believe there'd be a licensing agency that would license the Dyers, but they wouldn't receive PCA or kinship funding from the department either because of their denied home study.
Well, but since baby Dennis was it still is a CPS child, would he not be entitled to Medicaid?
Yes, ma'am.
He would?
Yes, ma'am, he would.
Okay. So that the college, all those past age 18 benefits would still be in effect for baby Dennis.
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Okay. That didn't seem to make much sense to me. Okay. What is Hope's, if you know this, what is Hope's husband's name? The guy that's in jail for, I think Mr. Davis said drug dealing or drugs.
Off the top of my head, I don't remember his name. So I wish I could help you.
Okay. You Mr. Davis asked you some questions about guns being in the Dyer's home. Did you, and you said you didn't know how many. Were there any guns in their home? Do you know of?
Whenever after he had asked that questions, I did remember a conversation that we had together shortly after they were considering placement. And I believe they told me the only firearm, I'm not sure if it's even considered a firearm, that they have in the home is a crossbow.
Their house is on the lake though, right?
Correct.
So they might have a snake gun or something like that, right?
I'm not sure if they do. The only thing they told me they had was a crossbow, and if that posed an issue, they'd be willing to get rid of it.
Okay. What about any alcohol and like a liquor cabinet, beer in the fridge, anything like that?
No, ma'am. The only time they told me that they do ever drink is when maybe a drink or two on Saturday or Sunday night when they go out for dinner together.
Okay. I was asking you. Miss Lang was talking to you about some type of department handbook or something along those lines. You probably remember what she was asking you about. And she talked about sibling contact. Okay. Based on your investigation, what contact, if any, was baby Dennis having with Wesley prior to all this happening?
As far as I'm aware, it was relatively little to no contact with Wesley.
Where does Wesley live?
I believe he lives in the Kingsland area, if I'm not mistaken.
But he had, Canyon is his half brother, correct?
Correct.
And he has contact with Canyon just because when the family gets together and stuff like that, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know if Carrie was having any contact with Wesley before her death?
Honestly, I'm not aware if she was having frequent contact or any contact at all with Wesley.
So you just don't know. Okay. Based upon also your investigation, you being on this case, was, in your opinion, was there discontent amongst the maternal family prior to Carrie's death, but Carrie's death has caused everybody to kind of unite and come together?
Yes, as far as I understand it, the discontent stemmed from the maternal family willing to take her in when she was trying to escape from Mr. Price. And then her going back to Mr. Price repeatedly, and then kind of that back and forth had really put them, really strained their relationship because they didn't understand. They didn't see why she would want to continue to go back. And so that was a lot of their strain on the relationship.
Well, what about the strain between Miss Parker and Miss Dyer and not going to baby shower, the no trespassing and all that? Has Carrie's death kind of reunited everybody?
Yes, I would say that's probably a really good way to put it, is that I feel like because of her passing, the entire maternal family has all kind of joined together, and they love to text me and call me and make sure that they inform me of everything going on and their strong desire to be placement for the baby.
Have they had, based on your investigation, have they had periods of up and down in their lifetime, family time, when they've been together as a family unit, then they're not together as a family unit, and they're back and forth, getting along, not getting along?
Yes, based on what I've known from them and from what I've investigated, that there has been points to where they may have not been on great speaking terms. And then of course that would change and they would go back and forth between we talk, then we don't talk. And then essentially that was just the repeating pattern. And now it seems like that their relationship is really strong.
Okay. Now, Miss Kathy Anderson, baby Dennis was born in January of 22, and the department got involved about 8 months later. Do you know if Miss Kathy Anderson was included in Carrie's baby shower?
I don't believe she was.
And do you know why she hadn't seen baby Dennis until all this started happening?
I believe it was because that she was aware of the family in Llano, Mr. and Miss Parker, Mr. and Miss Dyer, but she, due to the distance, she just wasn't really that involved in anything going on in the Llano, Kingsland, Buchanan Dam area.
But she lives in San Antonio, right?
Correct.
I mean, she doesn't live in Amarillo.
Correct.
And she, remind me again, I mean, I read the home study, before and after the last hearing, but like I said, I've slept since then. Is she Mrs. Parker's sister?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Tovar. Anybody else have any questions, Mr. Tovar?
Thank you. Mr. Tovar, would it surprise you, or do you have any knowledge of Carrie not having control of her phone on numerous occasions when Dennis would kick her out of the home?
Carrie would tell me yes occasionally that Carrie had told me that in terms of the phone that she wasn't able to have it sometimes, and as well as her vehicle, pretty much anything she told me that would let her be independent, she wouldn't have access to it for periods of time.
Thank you. Well, do you feel that perhaps the short piece of text that we saw maybe could have been taken out of context, or perhaps not even sent by Carrie? Is that possible?
Yeah, calls for speculation, Judge.
Sustain.
Okay.
As Mr. Tovar, are you aware that Wesley and Canyon were best of friends for many years?
That much I'm not too familiar with.
Okay, well, were you aware that he was a frequent guest at the Price family compound?
I have heard that Wesley would occasionally go by.
Are you aware of the circumstances that made them not have him over there anymore?
I believe when I spoke to Cody Young, I didn't hear specifically what had happened, but I believe it had to do with just the consistent conflict and violence going on in the household, that they didn't want him being around it anymore.
Okay. I don't know if I can ask this, but would it surprise you that Nancy and Dennis both made Wesley feel uncomfortable visiting his little
Objection. I'm going to object. First of all, personal knowledge and just calls for speculation again.
I don't think he can answer. He can answer if he knows. Do you know, Mr. Tovar?
I'm trying to recall specifically. I do remember hearing something about that, that it had something to do with Nancy Price telling Wesley that Carrie's not your real mom, or something along those lines, where they were speaking really negatively of the family, and then that made contact wanting to cease, if I remember correctly.
Mr. Tovar, did you first start having contact with Abigail concerning getting Carrie's baby before Carrie was killed?
Yes, we had our first contact, I want to say, maybe the very first day that I was assigned the case, just maybe a day or two after removal.
Would it occur to you, perhaps, that this text was trying to help Abigail gain custody of the child so Carrie would have more access to the child?
The text you're referring to, are you mentioning the text that Abigail had sent me?
Mm-hmm.
I believe so. I believe that it was just Carrie's mindset that she just wanted placement with Abigail because that's what Dennis wanted, and she just wanted to keep him happy.
And you also stated that Abigail has no previous knowledge of Dennis's violent behavior and his drug use?
That's what she claims, yes.
Okay. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Tovar.
Ms. McClure?
Raphael, Mr. Davis had a line of questioning most recently that said, based on the text, that Nancy had shielded Abigail from all of this information, correct?
Correct.
But yet Abigail told us at the first meeting, I'm sorry, not at the first meeting, Abigail told us later that she understood the crazy at her mom's home, and that's why she never took her kids there, right?
That's correct.
So once again, we've got the Goldilocks syndrome going on. It's not too big, it's not too little, it's got to be just right. We have just the right answer again. I didn't know too much about what happened because Mom shielded me, and I didn't know nothing because then I would not look good, but I knew just the right amount to come out looking good.
That seems to be my understanding of the testimony from Ms. Moore.
Thank you. That's all, Judge.
Anybody else?
I do, Your Honor.
Ms. Lang?
So, Mr. Tovar, the judge had asked you some questions based on the testimony we've heard at the prior hearing. And really, we're just hearing testimony through Abigail of what is alleged to have been said by Carrie. Is that right?
That's correct.
Today. Have you sat down and had a full conversation with Jamie and James Dyer about, let them tell you their full family story about the pushes and the pulls and the relationship times and what was going on? You know, could there be a chance that some of the truth has been misconstrued through Mrs. Moore's telling of the story based on now a woman who's deceased? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. I definitely feel like in cases involving domestic violence that the details definitely get very murky. And I feel like that both sides of the family have a significant amount to say in the way that events played out for them.
And I committed my cardinal sin. I asked you 2 questions at once. So I'm going to go back and ask my first one. I apologize. Have you had a full conversation with the Dyers about this up and down, whatever this relationship stuff is? Have you heard it firsthand from them any?
I've heard bits and pieces through our repeated conversations, but a full discussion centered entirely around the violence that was occurring in the household, I would say no.
Okay. And just to clarify, I believe that Miss Anderson is Carrie's biological father's sister. Does that sound more accurate to you?
Yes, that's correct. The family tree in my head has been getting very, very.
I understand. So not Miss Parker's sister, but Carrie's biological father's sister.
That's correct.
Okay. I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Anybody else? Mr. Davis?
Can I go just a few more?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Tovar, now we're hearing, and I like how it's characterized as the Goldilocks approach on Abigail's part, but the Dyers all seem to have some qualifier that can fix everything. So let's talk about they didn't have a good relationship with Carrie because of Dennis. She would go back to Dennis. That's now the theme. Is that what you're hearing them say?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Truth is before Dennis, Carrie had a history of mental health problems and violent outbursts, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, she had lost Wesley in the divorce, right?
That's correct.
Because she endangered him. She terminated her rights to Wesley, right?
That's I believe so, yes.
Okay, and she got several felony charges for endangerment on her involving Wesley, correct?
I believe so, yes.
She's been arrested a number of times in the past, right?
Yes.
Jamie refused to take her in July, right?
I believe so, yes.
And her mother took her to a woman's shelter. Didn't even want her to live with her, right?
I believe so, yes.
And that's when Lori came back around. So they kicked Carrie out, and they told Carrie, you go to a woman's shelter now, right?
I'm not too familiar with the conversation itself, but I believe that was that's what happened.
Okay, and then so Wesley, one of the ways that Carrie became accustomed, we talked about this last time, I'm just trying to refresh everybody's recollection. The Wesley and Nancy, well, Carrie originally started to interact with Nancy before Dennis because Canyon and Wesley were great friends, right?
I believe so, yes.
In fact, Nancy is the one that Carrie would take Wesley to babysit Wesley, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Wesley, who lives close by, doesn't stay with any of the Dyers or doesn't stay with the Parkers, does he?
To my knowledge, no.
And perhaps the reason, like it was just brought up, that, well, are you familiar that the reason they stopped doing it was because of the violence at the household with Wesley coming over? That's what you just heard, right?
Yes, I believe it was due to the violence and as well of an incident when Mr. Cody Young told me that there was concerns with Miss Nancy Price's involvement with Wesley and her telling Wesley that Carrie's not your real mother, that it was just really, in my opinion, distasteful.
Okay, but it has nothing to do with the fact that that she tried to kill Cody in the past, and that Cody probably thought, well, I should probably get her out of this situation, right?
Not too familiar, or not. I don't have personal knowledge of the actual events that like led to that decision.
You don't have actual knowledge about her driving a car through Cody Young's house?
Oh, that's sorry. That's what you're referring to. Yeah, yes, I have heard of that from Cody, and I believe Carrie did mention it previously at one point too.
Okay. So, I mean, all I was trying to clarify is you're saying that the whole reason Cody didn't want him around was Nancy Price's involvement and the conflict with Dennis, but you're not indicating maybe Cody has some concerns about Carrie as well, right?
Well, when I spoke to Cody, his primary concerns were the Price family as a whole.
Okay. And then, of course, again, Canyon is his half brother, right?
Correct.
And you would think it's important for baby Dennis to have a good relationship with his brother, right?
Absolutely.
And you heard last time, Abigail Moore indicates that she also has kept Wesley, right?
I'm sorry, you cut out before you said Wesley for me.
I apologize. You heard Abigail Moore testify last time that she also has kept Wesley, correct?
Correct.
So it's possible, is it not, that if Nancy Price is kind of given, if orders are put in place to limit Nancy Price's interactions, but Abigail could facilitate the meeting with both the brothers, couldn't she?
As far as I understand it, yes, she could.
I mean, she already drives to every visit from Huntsville to take care of stuff. It's possible she can take care of it with the other ones, right?
Yes, it is a possibility.
And again, there's no issues with anybody in Abigail's life or her background or any question as to her character, except for y'all are now worried that she may have known more about the abuse, right?
Correct.
But here's the one question I do have is we do know the people that certainly knew what was going on that did nothing, don't we?
I'm not, sounds like to me, I believe you're referring to the maternal family. And
Sure.
it sounds like that they did know what was going on and they made significant efforts to have Carrie removed from the situation. But I feel like in my experience of working domestic violence cases, unless the survivor wants to be helped and makes the realization on their own that it's dangerous.
Raphael, significant efforts, took her to a woman's shelter and wouldn't even take her in July. Told the police, no, she can't stay here, right?
I believe that's just two of the actual efforts they've made, but I know they've made more, have consistent. I don't know the specific details of the actual efforts they've made, but I do know that they have taken Carrie in on multiple occasions and they have remained in contact with her previously. But as CPS became involved at the very start of the case, that's when their relationship was probably the most strained it's been, from my knowledge.
Okay, they've taken her in now, but they've also refused to take her in the past, even preceding this CPS involvement, right?
Yes, I believe after repeated incidents where she would go over there and then go back and forth. So I believe that they were wanting to help her, but I feel like that they begin to feel discouraged, which I feel like is pretty normal given the circumstances Carrie was in.
And none of them did anything to get Wesley out of his situation, right?
As far as I understand it, well, I actually don't have personal knowledge of their involvement with Wesley.
Okay, but we know that Wesley ended up going with his non-biological adopted father, right?
That's correct.
But when she was driving cars through houses, threatening to kill Wesley, nobody did anything though that you're aware of, right?
No, I don't have personal knowledge on any of those incidents.
I mean, they did get help with getting an affidavit of non-prosecution prepared for Carrie, right?
I don't have personal knowledge of that.
You're not aware that Miss Lang drafted that?
No, I'm not very familiar with any of that.
And if I misspoke on that, I'm sorry. It's my understanding that there was something involving an affidavit of non-prosecution that there's personal knowledge of on that, on the other side of the family, correct?
Right. I'm not too familiar with any of that, the criminal stuff with Carrie at that time.
Okay, pass on this.
Anybody else? Ms. McClure?
Yes, Judge. Raphael, just one last quick question. Whenever a family is all in and they enable bad behavior and they cover up bad behavior and they lie to enable bad behavior to continue, is that good for the person who is in a bad place that is being abused?
I'm sorry. The connection was very spotty at the start of that. I got bits and pieces of it. If we don't mind, could you repeat that for me?
So when a family enables a family member to continue to make bad decisions, to continue to live in an abusive situation, if that family enables that bad behavior, are they helping that family member?
No, they're actually quite the opposite. They're hurting it and contributing directly towards the endangerment of that person.
And when a family puts up appropriate boundaries and tries not to enable the bad behavior to continue, is it messy?
It is very messy. I don't think I've worked a case involving domestic violence with family members trying to help that didn't involve a significant amount of strain being placed on the family at some point.
And is trying not to enable, is it hard to do?
Absolutely. I feel like that each relative wants to tell their sister, their daughter, or whatever it is, they always want to tell them yes, but it's harder when they have to tell them no and set up those boundaries.
But whenever a family likes to enable and wants to enable, and they all coalesce around the enabling, it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yes, it does look good.
It kind of looks like everybody's on the same page, doesn't it?
Correct.
And there's not a lot of messy pointing fingers because everybody's got the same script, don't they?
Correct.
Thank you, Judge. That's all I've got.
Anybody else?
Just one, Your Honor. Mr. Tovar, based on the line of questions that Ms. McClure just asked you, are you concerned about enabling in the Price family that would potentially make it difficult to follow court orders regarding lack of contact with Price family members, including perhaps Nancy Price?
I absolutely do have some significant concerns with concerns if they'd be able to follow court orders, particularly due to Nancy Price's involvement in the case at the start of the case. It felt very as if she was the one fighting for custody of her child at the start.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Tovar, would it, after speaking to us and asking us many questions on visits, would it surprise you if you were to think that we ever refuse to help Carrie?
Just from talking to you, I feel like that you guys had Carrie's best interest at heart and that you did significantly care about her from our conversation.
Including the last conversation you had with Carrie herself before death?
Yes, I believe that Carrie also felt that you cared for her a lot, and she was the one, you were the ones that she was talking about how she knows she could go with you and that you would take her in.
Thank you.
Judge, I needed one more question. I apologize.
Okay.
Just one more. Mr. Tovar, you said something a minute ago when we were talking about a concern because of Nancy Price's involvement in the case early on. And you used the term because she was fighting hard, and you said for her child. Is that how she referred to baby Dennis whenever the case was first beginning? She was fighting for her child?
I believe she did say it once, but then she had said my grandchild.
Okay, that's all.
Correct.
That's all I needed. Thank you, Judge.
Anybody else? Okay, I have one question. I hope it doesn't stir up a whole lot. I don't think it will. Mr. Tovar, baby Dennis is seeing Canyon now on some of the visits because Ms. Moore brings Canyon to some of her visits. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is baby Dennis seeing Wesley in?
No, he's not, but we have had a discussion on now getting him involved in visitations weekly, just like Canyon.
Have you talked to Mr. Young about that?
I haven't had a discussion directly relating to getting Wesley involved, but it is something that I'm interested in doing.
So you don't know if Mr. Young's going to say yay or nay, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, y'all, I have another question, Mr. Tovar. I apologize. And I really hope this doesn't stir it up again. But Mr. Tovar, remind me again how often baby Dennis goes to therapies, ECI, those type of things.
He was going every other week at one point, but now I think she's seeing him weekly. Or no, I think I had it backwards. It was every week, and then now it's every other week.
Okay. And so the only kind of specialty things he goes to is through ECI, correct?
That's correct. The only specialty therapist that he's seeing right now is the speech therapist, occupational therapist, and I believe that's it. But he's been making significant progress in his actual development. Now, I mean, he is walking. I saw him at the foster home about a week ago, and he's extremely mobile, and he's definitely able to sort of talk to you, mostly just in syllables, but you can kind of get the gist of what he's saying sometimes.
Okay, but he didn't have any like PD cardiologist or anything like that,
No,
right?
ma'am. No, ma'am.
Ms. Tovar, have you contemplated how services would be provided to baby Dennis if he's placed with Ms. Moore or San Antonio or in this area?
Yes, I know that in this area, we definitely live in very rural counties, and so getting access to some of the programs will be harder. However, that I do know that I think Marble Falls and Round Rock, if the Dyers would be willing to make the drive, do still service the Burnett County, Delano County areas. And San Antonio obviously is surrounded by nothing but therapists and specialists, and same thing with Huntsville being in such close proximity to Houston.
And Ms. Moore had already located a type of therapist that she could private pay for baby Dennis if the department wouldn't have availability, correct?
Correct. And the department would be able to, Dennis would still be covered under Medicaid, so she wouldn't have to pay anything out of pocket, and neither would any of the other caregivers, unless they didn't accept the Superior Health Medicaid.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No. Yay, that was good. Okay, Mr. Davis, next witness, please.
Your Honor, I don't know if one of my witnesses just popped up into the witness room at Jody.
Yes, there's Jody's iPhone. Could that be her?
Yes, Judge. How do you know Abigail Moore?
She's my sister-in-law.
Okay. And how long has she been your sister-in-law?
I'm not sure exactly how long they've been married. Probably about 15, 16 years, but I've known her prior to them getting married.
And you live in the Huntsville area?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And when were you contacted to testify?
About 10 minutes ago.
Before that, did you have any interaction? Have we ever spoken?
No, sir.
Did you really have any understanding of what was going on in this case?
No.
Okay. So, but at a moment's notice, you jumped on Zoom?
Yes, and I apologize for my appearance. I work from home, and unfortunately, I don't have to get dressed to do that. So I apologize for that.
So briefly, just tell the court, what type of person is Abigail Moore?
She's a wonderful person. I couldn't ask for a better wife for my brother or mother for my niece and nephews.
Okay. And are you familiar with her character for truthfulness?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Would you say that you're familiar with her character and reputation for truthfulness?
Oh, absolutely.
Is she a truthful person?
She's a very honest person, no doubt.
And is she involved with her children in school?
She's very involved with her kids in school, as well as our church. We attend the same church service. She's very involved with the children, with the church as well.
Okay. And knowing Abigail, her husband, and then y'all's family there, do you have a lot of family support in Huntsville?
We do. We have a very large family, all very supportive.
Okay. Friends in the area as well?
Yes, sir. We have a lot of friends. We've been here our entire lives, and so we're surrounded by friends and family.
Okay. Any of the people that Abigail and your brother associate with, to your knowledge, have any criminal history?
Oh, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And any sources of conflict, violence, drugs, anything like that you're aware of?
No, sir.
Okay. Is Abigail a rule follower?
Absolutely.
Based on your knowledge of her, is she the type of person, if she's told to do something by a court, that she would follow it?
Yes, sir. She definitely would.
And how would you describe her level of involvement with her children?
She's very, very active with her kids.
Okay. And regarding your brother, he has his own business?
Yes, sir. My brothers have a very successful logging business here in Huntsville.
Okay. So they have significant resources, correct?
Absolutely.
Is that coming from, do you know Nancy Price?
I know, yes, I do know Nancy.
Okay. I mean, is she the one that's really supporting Abigail financially, or is your brother making some good money?
Oh, I don't know her finances at all, but I do know my brother's finances, and I don't know that they would ever have to borrow money from anybody for anything, honestly. Money is not an issue in our family.
This case is about, has to do with placement right now for a baby.
Hmm.
Do you think Abigail would be a suitable place for that baby, or placement for that baby?
Oh, absolutely. I have 2 daughters, and I would trust her. If I were to pass away tomorrow, she would have custody of my children without a doubt.
And are you available to help if needed?
Oh, yes, sir. I work from home, so my schedule is really flexible. I mean, as you can tell, I'm not, yes, absolutely.
Is Nancy Price at the house all the time that you're aware of?
At Abigail's house?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm aware of that now.
I'm gonna pass the witness, Judge.
Anybody have any questions of Ms. Gustafson? Did I say it right?
Yes, ma'am.
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Lang.
And once again, may I call you Jody? I don't want to
Yes.
call you Miss G. Okay. All right. Just quickly, have you ever met Miss Moore, Abigail Moore's sister, Rebecca?
I have.
Okay, and tell me what the nature of that meeting was.
I mean, I see her on occasion from, at birthday parties. Her kids are involved with my children, so I've seen her there. Her kids attend church at our church, so I've, encountered her there as well. I don't.
Her children go to the church, but she doesn't go. Does the family go to the church, or just the kids?
They go to our Wednesday Night Live program, but I don't think they attend a different church for Sunday services, so I don't see her there.
And so she lives in y'all's neighborhood or your community, right?
She lives outside of, as far as I know.
I'm sorry, you cut out. She lives outside of where?
I think she lives right outside of town, as far as I know.
Okay. Have you ever met Abigail Moore's sister, Terry?
Yes.
And tell me how you met her.
I mean, just throughout the years, birthday parties, holidays and such.
Okay. And where would those be held at?
I mean, if I encounter any of the family, it's going to be at my brother and Abigail's house.
Okay. Have you ever been down to Seabrook?
No, I have not.
Have you been up to Kingsland ever, to where they have property up there?
I think we went one summer, but that was, it was years ago, probably, I don't know, 8. No, it was several years. I don't recall what year it was, but it's been many, many years since I've been out there.
Was Dennis Price, have you met her brother, Dennis?
I have.
Okay. How did you tell me about those meetings?
It's going to be the same as the other family. I mean, on occasion from, birthday parties and maybe some holidays. I'm not real sure.
Okay. And was there alcohol? Did they usually have some beer and wine and stuff available at those parties?
Not at a children's birthday party. No.
Okay. So you never did an evening thing. It was always children's events.
From what I recall, yes. I don't recall anything other than just birthday parties and maybe an occasional holiday, but I don't know that for certain.
How about Miss Abigail Moore's brother Marshall and his wife Sandy?
I think Marshall maybe at their wedding, but that's it.
Okay. And that would have been 15 or 16 years ago is what you'd said earlier, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then you're familiar with the charges that are pending about against Abigail Moore's mother, Nancy. Are you familiar with that?
No, ma'am.
You don't know that she's got a felony pending for, I believe, tampering with evidence?
No, ma'am. I have no idea.
Do you know about the murder charge pending against her brother, Dennis Moore, who is currently on the screen and sitting in the Burnett County Jail in Burnett County, Texas? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
What is your understanding of what happened with that incident?
All I know is that Carrie is deceased and the baby is in custody with someone else, and that's where Abigail kind of is involved now.
So Carrie is deceased. Do you know who's been charged with killing her?
I mean, I'm going to assume Dennis. I mean, since he's in jail, I don't know the details. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know much about it, but it's not really my business. I'm just.
Abigail, go.
No, I'm sorry. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, you were saying it's really none of your business. I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
I don't really pry into their business. I just know that Abigail is trying to get custody of the baby, which is why I'm here.
Okay. So did she specifically tell you that my brother Dennis is accused of murdering his wife Carrie?
I'm not honestly sure if she came out and said that. I mean, no, I don't know.
Okay. And have you seen baby Dennis?
I don't think I've ever seen him, no.
And tell me about Carrie. Did you get to meet Carrie?
No, ma'am.
So when's the last time you saw Dennis at a birthday party?
Oh, I have no idea. I can't even recall. I'm sorry.
No problem. I pass the witness.
Anybody else? Anything else, Mr. Davis?
I mean, just a quick few follow-ups. Jody, knowing your brother and Abigail, do they have any real drama going on in their life with conflict and staying involved in other family disputes, things of that nature?
No, sir. Honestly, our family doesn't really do drama. So there's no, absolutely not.
I mean, Abigail and your brother, are they kind of boring people?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are they fairly boring? They go out, party, they have big get-togethers all the time with alcohol?
And no, sir.
Are they like early to bed, early to rise type people?
Yes, my brother is a very hard worker and he rises early every single morning. So you can bet he's in bed early every night.
Okay. And they're on property with, I guess, the whole area. Y'all got like family property and stuff, about 300 acres that they're on.
Yes, sir. Yeah, surrounded by my family.
Is it unlike Abigail to tell you about all sorts of personal problems with her extended family?
We don't really get into that. I mean, it's like I said earlier, it's not really my business, nor I'm not a nosy person. I'm not going to pry. I mean, if there's something that she feels comfortable talking to me about, she'll talk to me about it. If not, that's okay too. It's not, it's not my place to pry. So.
Okay. All right. Is she involved in things with the kids' school, like PTA, church organizations or church events and extracurriculars for the kids?
Yes, sir. Yeah. They stay very involved, very active in extracurricular activities. They play sports. And then, like I said earlier, the church, they're involved in the church services as well.
And her children, are they good kids?
Yes. Yes. I'm biased, but I adore them, each and every one of them.
Any reason to believe they wouldn't be good role models or peers to a baby boy growing up?
No, they absolutely love that baby.
Okay. Pass witness.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Gustafson, how old are your children?
I have a senior in high school. She's 18. And then I have a sophomore in college. She just turned 20.
Okay. So your kids are older than the Moore's children.
Right. They are.
Okay. 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 Thank you, Ms. Gustafson. May Ms. Gustafson be excused, y'all?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
excuse. Thank you. Move.
Sorry, Judge. James Dyer.
James Dyer. Okay, Mr. Dyer.
So Mr. Dyer, in your when you were interviewed for the placement, you'd indicated there's not been any history of drug or alcohol abuse, correct? On your part.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And you did state that you'd had some legal issues in the past that involved alcohol, right?
Yes, sir.
Specifically, your previous wife, I believe, as you indicated in your report, she'd been shot and you'd been drinking, correct?
Yes, sir.
And actually, it says previous wife, but how many times have you been married?
4.
And that's counting Jamie?
Yes, sir.
And was that your first wife, second wife that passed away?
First wife.
The witness to that crime, you were charged with murder, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, the state moved forward and took it all the way to trial, right?
That's correct, but I wanted a jury trial. I turned down the plea bargain.
Okay. So you did the jury trial and your witness was your mother, right?
Yes, sir.
And apparently, the way it's described is, a gun just kind of went off. But the truth is your wife was shot off the front porch, right?
The gun did go off and she was shot. Yes.
And y'all had a child together, right?
Yes, sir.
And what was her name?
Angel Lee Dyer.
And so after this accident occurred, you were prosecuted and you were previously on some form of probation or deferred or something of that nature for a burglary charge, right?
Yes, sir.
And that was because you and your cousin, young, stupid, went to go get some beer out of a convenience store, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you also have this tragic accident, as you're saying, occurred. And you also, after all these have happened, then you were arrested again and charged with a form of assault, family violence of another family member, right?
Yes, sir.
And then your cousin, he dismissed those charges on you, right?
Yes, sir.
And that all happened while you were waiting trial for a murder case, right?
Yes, sir.
And because of this accident, the facts surrounding this accident, you're telling the court that the judge decided to revoke your probation and give you the full 20 years on your burglary case, right?
Yes, sir.
The burglary case, it just involved young kids being stupid, getting some alcohol, right?
Yes, sir.
Had nothing to do with the underlying facts and situation of the murder charge, did it?
He told me he was going to make an example out of me.
Okay. So your daughter, she went with her maternal grandparents, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then they would never let her contact you, right?
Yes, sir.
The truth is they didn't let her contact you because they knew you and her daughter had a lot of conflict in the marriage, right?
I don't believe so.
In fact, your wife was going to leave you, remember?
No, sir.
So if Carrie said that to somebody, that wouldn't be true?
Who's on trial here? A dead woman? I mean,
Oh, Mr. Dyer, you can't ask questions. You have to answer Mr. Davis's question. We don't need any comments like that. Go on, Mr. Davis.
Yes, could you?
And
could
you know
answer
what, Dyer, if you really want to know the truth, y'all are kind of on trial because of the home study and because y'all have, everybody's on trial. You're no different than Mrs. Moore coming forward and seeking custody of the child. So your history, everybody else that wants custody of this child, your life is an open book. So don't say anything else like that.
yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but go on, Mr. Davis.
Yes, Judge. There was conflict in your marriage, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's why the grandparents would never let you visit with your daughter. You didn't actually talk to her really until she was 18, correct?
Yes, sir.
Or over 18 at least, right?
Yes, sir.
You've talked to her, you've met her one time, right?
That's correct.
She won't even give you her phone number, will she?
I haven't asked for it.
I thought you'd indicated in your report that you'd asked for it, but she wasn't quite ready to give it to you. Is
I don't.
that not
believe-
true? That wasn't, am I misstating?
I don't recall that, but it could be.
And so you also, while you were in prison, you took AA classes, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. I mean, because the truth is you do have a problem with alcohol, right?
I wouldn't go that far, sir.
Okay. So after you had an incident where your life has completely changed, you got into a burglary charge from the get-go for alcohol. Did you get in a fight with when you got in a fight with your cousin? Were you drinking?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you got in a fight with your cousin while you were drinking. And then you shot your wife while you've been drinking. So, but you still drink now, correct?
No, sir.
You don't drink at all?
No, sir.
You didn't report that you still have alcohol from time to time?
I haven't had a drink since last year.
Last year. Okay, so now you're stopped. And by last year, you mean 2022?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A lot of things have changed very recently, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that Jamie and her mother, they didn't get along for years, right?
Yes, sir.
In fact, Jamie's had to call the cops on her mother when she's come over to the house, correct?
No, sir.
She's never called the cops on her mom?
No, sir.
Never?
Never.
And she didn't invite, well, didn't she call somebody out to have no trespassing for her mother?
No, sir. The no trespassing signs was there the whole time.
Was there a dispute regarding her trespassing on the property?
No.
And so if Carrie ever said that the police are here and Jamie called the police on mom, that's not true?
I've never seen or heard Jamie call the police on her mom.
You're aware of Jamie's sister Lori, right?
Yes, sir.
So Lori's had some problems with drugs in the past, right?
Yes, sir.
She went to prison for it, right?
I believe so.
And that's how Wesley was taken in by Carrie, right?
I believe so.
You guys didn't adopt Wesley, right?
No, sir.
In fact, y'all never had Wesley over to your house.
That ain't true, sir.
How many times have you had Wesley over?
Probably a couple times since I took this job out on the ranch, and a lot over at the house in Granite Shoals.
Okay. Isn't it true that Jamie blames a lot of the problems on Lori as far as her drug addiction on her mother?
I can't speak for Jamie, so.
Okay. Now let's talk about, so you and Jamie have a child together, right?
Yes, sir.
Who's that?
That's Luke Dyer.
How old's Luke?
He'll be 20 on the 1st of May.
On the 1st of May. What's he doing for a living?
He works for, they build custom handrails and gates for decks and porches.
Okay. Where does he live?
He lives in Granite Shoals.
And then, does he have any children?
No, sir.
And then Jamie has 2 other children, right?
Yes, sir.
And then what are their names and ages?
Hope is 20. It'd be Hope Eskew. She's 27, I believe. And Christian Eskew, and he just turned 25.
Okay. Where does Hope work?
Hope works at the Family Dollar there in Granite Shoals.
And where does Christian work?
He works at a design company there in Marble Falls. They design stuff for houses.
How many children? I'm sorry. How many children does Hope have?
Hope has 3.
And how many children does Christian have?
He has 1.
Okay. Now Hope lives in the house that, I guess, is it Jamie and you own the home, or just Jamie?
Both of us.
Okay. So Hope lives in that home with her 3 children, right?
Yes, sir.
And her husband is now in jail, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it had to do with drugs, right?
I believe so.
And you know that Hope has had problems with drugs in the past too, correct?
I don't know about that. Maybe it's suspicions, but I have nothing to give me proof about it. So,
And one of the reasons, her husband's name is Jason. Is it Jason Eskew?
sir,
Is her husband's name Jason Eskew? Is that who it is?
Jason Smith.
Jason Smith. I apologize. Jason Smith, one of the sources of the conflict is they were fighting over meth, right?
I don't believe so. And no.
Okay.
Domestic.
So she's now living in that home. Jason's in prison, right?
He's in county jail.
Okay. Was there a CPS case involving Hope?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So last time when we had the CPS here, they indicated that there was no CPS case, or that they weren't aware of any history. But your testimony is that in fact there was some CPS involvement, correct?
It's been closed for a while.
Okay. Now Hope's living in the home that originally Carrie and Wesley lived in, correct?
Yes.
And Carrie was buying that home from y'all, right?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir.
She didn't give Jamie $6,000 to purchase the home?
No, sir.
Okay. But Jamie did have her leave so Wesley could come in there. I mean, so that Hope could come in, correct?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. So if CPS a second ago said that they had heard about that's inaccurate, right?
Yes, sir.
Was there a dispute in any way with Carrie and Jamie involving that home?
No, sir. Other than Jamie didn't want her to leave it unattended, unlocked while she went to Dennis's house for days at a time.
Okay. Did Luke move in that home too?
No, sir.
He's never lived in that home?
But he grew up in the home.
Okay. Truth is that the issues with Hope and her children was causing quite a bit of stress for Jamie, right?
Jamie was just trying to help her get away from a domestic violence situation.
I mean, so yeah, so she had to help her child out, right?
Yes, sir.
And she's got 3 grandchildren, correct? That she also needs to help.
Yes, sir.
So you're living in a home that goes with the job, right? I mean, as long as you're working there, you're in the home, correct?
Yes, sir.
But Ms. Dyer, if you're in the placement study, it indicates that Ms. Dyer was hoping you could retire soon. Remember that?
From my second job, yes, sir.
What's your second job?
I'm a head mechanic and manager at the resort in Sunrise Beach.
Isn't that the one that we're talking about with the home you're on?
No, sir.
Okay, what's the other job you have?
I just take care of the ranch. I mow, weed eat, feed the animals out here.
But the truth is Jamie's also indicated before that home, that's not a sure thing, right? Y'all gonna have to move.
Eventually, yes, sir.
Okay. You indicated that you sometimes, like everybody else, you have stress with work, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. How many firearms are in your home?
None. I own a crossbow.
Okay. So when you said in your report that when you get stressed, you like to go fishing and hunting,
Yes, sir.
you're talking about your crossbow?
Yes, sir. As long as it's in season.
Okay. So you're not borrowing a gun from somebody?
No, sir. Don't have to.
Well, another area of contention with Jamie and her mother. Oh, let me ask you this. Jamie, regarding her other 2 children, Hope and Christian, at one point, she didn't raise them. At one point, she left them for a while, right?
No, sir. No, sir.
Never happened?
That's absolutely not true.
So if Carrie said something about Jamie walked out on her kids, that never happened?
I'm sorry. No, sir. It did not.
Okay. Let's talk about her stepdad. Isn't it true that her stepdad was abusive physically to Jamie and Lori?
I do not believe that. I don't have no evidence of that. No, sir.
You've heard it.
I've heard it, but I have not witnessed anything like that.
And again, you've also heard the drug use issues, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I mean, you've been over to her mother's house, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's got more than just a little bit of clutter when it's normally kept, doesn't it?
I would say yes.
Okay, so let's talk about, so you guys are saying to this court, we are more than capable of taking on baby Dennis financially, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're working 2 jobs, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Jamie, she just started, I guess, what, was it 2021, 2022 at Wells Fargo?
I believe it around 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay. And so, I mean, combined, y'all are making roughly, you're bringing in about 6,800, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And that of course doesn't, well, scratch that. But at the time also when you were filling out the stuff for your home study, y'all didn't even have health insurance at that time, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
All right. So health insurance is now in place. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then the rent you're paying, you show $617 a month, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's for as long as you can keep that house, correct?
No, sir, that's not correct. I don't pay rent on this house.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this for the other home?
Yes, sir. Or mortgage.
Okay. Okay. So if you ever had to rent somewhere, we'd have to factor that in too, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then of course you and Ms. Dyer, y'all got full-time jobs, right?
Yes, sir.
So baby Dennis is definitely going to need some childcare, correct?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you didn't have any expenses for gas on your budget. Do y'all not drive, bike, walk? What do you do?
No, we drive, sir.
Okay. And then if you and Jamie need a date night, you're going to have grandma and grandpa watch baby Dennis, right?
Possibility, are we taking with us?
You and Ms. Dyer, y'all were pretty concerned about the level of the price involvement with baby Dennis after this instance. I mean, after this case is done, if y'all get baby Dennis, y'all are concerned about the level of interaction between the Price family, right?
I would say yes.
I mean, in fact, in your report, the study, you indicate y'all want restraining orders on them, right?
I didn't say that. We didn't say that. No, sir.
That's not in your report that y'all would seek a restraining order on them?
No, sir.
Ms. Dyer also indicates that she maintains a close relationship with Dennis's half brother, with the biological father, right? Is that true?
What was the question, sir?
Is Ms. Dyer, does she maintain a close relationship with it's just indicated as the half brother's biological father? Do you know who she's referring to?
No, sir.
I mean, it's possible we're referring to Wesley, but it's not the biological father we're talking about.
Wesley, yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
So she says that she maintains a close relationship with Cody.
Well, talking relationship.
So when Lori had her problem and it resulted in let me scratch that. So in your opinion, throughout the years, how long had you known Carrie Price? I'm sorry, and I'm mistaken the last name, but how long had you known Carrie?
I believe since 2002.
2002. And did she have some mental illness that was not diagnosed in your opinion?
When she was younger, no, sir.
Okay. So that just started happening just recently?
Not recently. I believe it's from the company she kept.
Okay, from the company she kept. So it's been for quite some time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Like 10 years?
No, I wouldn't go that long, sir.
Okay. How long would you go?
Probably 5 at the most that I've seen.
Oh, that you've seen. Okay. And now that would have put her in the time period where she's with, that would have been Cody, correct? She would have been with Cody?
I believe so, yes, sir.
All right. And we've talked about this. You've heard us that's when she had, drove into Cody's home with the car, right?
Yes, sir.
She got arrested several times for child endangerment involving Wesley.
I believe so,
right?
yes.
So y'all have known Carrie's had some trouble for quite some time, 5 years at least, right?
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that before Carrie had Wesley, though, she didn't have any problems?
I believe Carrie was fine until she really started dating.
Okay. And so, but when it came time for somebody to get Wesley, you guys did not take Wesley in, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And then Miss Parker didn't take Wesley in, correct?
Correct.
And then, of course, following the divorce with Cody, and the other father terminated his rights. Following the divorce with Cody took Wesley, right?
Yes, sir.
You think it's important for baby Dennis to have a relationship with his brother, Canyon?
Absolutely.
I'll pass witness.
Ms. Greenwald, do you want to take a break? I have 12:03.
Sure, Judge.
As Miss Lang, I figure you'll be pretty long with Mr. Dyer, won't you?
Yes, Your Honor.